Hi, Mr. Koul. That's what we fondly call you. We've been talking to each other for some time now, and I'm so proud to have you as our mentor, a revered mentor who could take, a student, a humble student from second year to a world forum. And before we begin, uh, Mr. Koul, can I please request you if you are of the know-how that we are recording this?
Affirmative.
Thank you so much. Let's start from your family background. Tell us where you come from. How was it before Thapar? Tell us about your parents. Tell us about your background. Go ahead.
Hey, so I was born and brought up in Delhi from a Kashmiri family. Um, Both parents are engineers, and dad worked more in hydropower electric dams, and mom eventually became a professor in business. And this is where I am, where they taught me a bit about hard work, which every parent tells. And I think the story unfolds from there.
Fantastic. So tell me who inspired you more, your mom or your dad?
And both equally, they have equal different dimensions. So I think that's what you need for a recipe for doing well.
Absolutely. Now, this is the time when you come to Thapar, first year. Tell us how was that experience?
Definitely totally different than what you would expect in a high school. I think this happens with everybody. The moment they step in, it's a new world. Rooms have suddenly gotten bigger, from places where for like 20, 30 people sit in a high school to suddenly 100 people. Uh, you're now in a place where people are of very high caliber. They have done something in life, put in enough hard work to get into Thapar. So inferiority complex definitely runs high for majority of the people, and that's okay because everybody has that. So it takes some time to settle in, know where you are, what's your places, and how you would go and do better. Luckily, the professors are there to make it a little bit of a soothing experience, even in this chaotic first few months. So great to be part of that ride.
Amazing. Cool. Whenever we've had this conversation or we've introduced you to a mentee or when we've always spoken about the mentorship program, I know how much involved you were, or how involved you are for the last 5 years. You've always said my grades aren't that great. You've been always very emphatic about it. So what was happening in that 1 year?
I was really, really, really excited about computer science. But when you start off your engineering journey, you are studying all other subjects. Uh, and I didn't even know how bad I was. I would say I'm not a student who, I was usually a student who would sit still in the first row, still try to, put in the effort. But I actually didn't know how bad I was at those places. But at the same time, in my free time, I was spending all my efforts in learning about machine learning, building projects, going to programming contests. Uh, so I had a point in life where, on one hand, all my subjects were in like the C's and D's. And at the same time, I had a research paper in computer science being published. And one of the projects I had worked with one of my seniors was called as the National Geographic Innovator of the Year Award and had TV ads on National Geographic. So it was like the duality of life. But there's like it's not something. There's something still good that was happening in the direction of what I wanted to achieve. So I'm not complaining.
Fantastic. I'm so proud of that inspiring thing that you always tell our mentees about the research work that got published in the first year. Tell me, you were very favorites. You instantly became very favorite of your professors, and you actually had the key and passwords to most of their doors and labs. What was that about?
Uh, I was going around. So we are four students, like-minded students. I'll actually flip the story in a different way. When you come into university, you're still trying to find a group of people where you really fit in. Interestingly, I ended up in second year hostel. So I was a first year undergraduate student living in a second year hostel because they ran out of hostel space. And so being in that environment, I found some people who actually were excited about things like machine learning. So four of us built a group, and who were all excited about things that can happen. And I mean, it still took 10, 15 years for those technologies to really show up. And along with that, we started doing things. We started building, we need to have a society for like-minded people. We called it IOTA, which is now called as Creative Computer Science Society. I think it's still there now. And we started doing things like, if we just had the hardware, what else could we achieve? We didn't have internet in hostels, by the way, right? Most of us didn't even have a laptop back then. So, we need to have a lab where we can do our experiments, install Linux and do like mathematical experiments of how things would go about. So some professors saw like, okay, there is a group of people, who are all excited. So they just gave us the keys and say, okay, this is the password to my computer, do what you want to do here. You can use the internet. So in the day, they would be using the machines. In the night, we would be using it. So there was a professor, Dr. Kasana, who was the head of the mathematics side. And he, just gave unconditional support. And then there was a lab, the numerical analysis lab. It was then run by Dr. Karun Verma. He gave us the keys. It's like, okay, here are 20, 25 computers. Do whatever you want. We have just bought them, right? We went, installed Linux on it, kept the password in our names. And I heard that 10 years later, when students graduate, they still, that's still the password of those machines, even though those machines have still been upgraded to better machines. Similarly, Dr. Maninder Singh, who's now the head of computer science, he gave us access to, his lab. I think that's like the common story in here. People just giving us access to do whatever. And we found some interesting things that we could find in their configurations and doing experiments in distributed processing. So that was definitely support that helps us do fun things.
You also mentioned that you were sent to so many competitions which you won. I would like you to bring in that comparative between some other colleges and Thapar when you're competing at a level. Let us know about that, please.
Sure. So I think if you are coming from the admission cycle, there are some universities like the IITs who have a much, much brighter brand name, right? So you always think about, okay, so what's the difference between different colleges? And so I like programming. That was my first love back then, even now. And so like, okay, if we are decent at programming, could we actually go to other places to see how well we do? So there used to be all these festivals of, technical festivals that you could go to. So a few buddies of mine from that Creative Computer Science Society, we would go together, go to these programming contests and build something creative. And we started noticing that our win rate was relatively high. And it was not that we would get a certificate, but they would actually give us money, right? So we just started winning money for the university. I remember, I think half of my university fees were just coming from these programming contests, at least. Going to, different IITs, IIT Delhi, IIT Roorkee, IIT Bombay. So that was a good experience. The other thing was there were things of like, I think people who are dedicated, people who have the motivation to keep exploring what they don't know are ready to be uncomfortable. They get to see better experiences, learn more. So that's a great way to self-discover. And eventually you find like you are starting to get better at certain things. In a very similar way, in one of those labs, I had downloaded the resumes of everyone at Stanford and MIT who have gone on to masters to study like, okay, what makes people who eventually go for future studies stand out, what they have done in their undergraduate. So maybe that's the kind of resume we can model that shows your inner signal of exceptionalism. And that's what I need to develop in the 4 years. So programming contests came to be a huge help eventually when I went for master's and for graduate studies.
So I'm hearing you right. Is this what I'm hearing you say, that it's really in the mind, that you versus any other college is only as big as how you make it, or how big you want to be? Because I'm understanding, if you were downloading resumes from people who were mastering in who were doing masters, pursuing masters in MIT, you're actually considering yourself one of them. Am I right?
Well, you can aspire to be better. I think at the end of the day, you need a role model of like what is the thing that can be achieved. So now by studying all your resumes, you can kind of see, okay, here is the kind of the baseline for the minimal person, like the minimal skill sets that somebody would get in a place like that. And so you have time, 3 years, 4 years, 2 years to model yourself into a person who could reach that. I think there's just what anybody would do as the market analysis of what you need to do to achieve and set a goal. So this was a helpful exercise. And while I do not write programming contests on my resume now, but back then, if you opened up my resume, that was the thing that would help me set myself apart if I was going for a scholarship or for master's studies back then.
Fantastic. So here you are in second year, and you have now these 3 years only dedicated to computer engineering. While you were programming, coding, doing well, you loved doing things about and around computer programming. Were you part of any community club at campus, or how was your activity, or how was your life, day spent outside the lab or the computer programming field?
That's a hard question outside computers. So one thing that happened was I became part of, just like you have Saturnalia right now, there were some events, cultural events, where I would be the keyboard player. So if there's any musical event happening, I would participate in that. I didn't have a synthesizer, but the university had, so that was something that I could be a part of. Then I was also, if there's any event happening, I would be the AV person. So like actually organizing what would happen on the screens, how that would be conducted. That's the kind of places where I would be a part of. Those were the two things that would actually keep me busy. And I wish I would have been into comparing on the stage and being a host, because that would have improved my speaking skills, is what I would have said to myself now. But now I do that thing anyway.
Fantastic. This is 4 years of college at Thapar. You graduate, and tell us about the journey from there on.
So I also started at the very end of my undergraduate to apply to external universities. I got into Dalhousie University first, where once I graduated out, I got into Yahoo, and I worked at Yahoo as a research engineer. So some of those projects that I was talking about and some of those research papers, interestingly, the research paper is what got me in there, because I could give, because the way I got into a lab where most of the other people were PhDs was that I had a published research paper which had won a best paper award early in my journey. So I think that was the single item that sealed my deal. And I was like, this is like 2-3 years old paper at this point. That was one interesting part. So I got into a place where most of the people were PhDs and I was the only undergraduate. That helped build a lot of experience into research. It also helped me, and because I used to do those programming contests, I got in a habit of secretly building prototypes. And then every 2 weeks showing to the director of program management, hey, here's an idea, here's a working prototype, why don't we go and build this? From that, I ended up building a playbook of, I call it the idea book of 60 ideas that my product should be working on. And here is a running demo of each one of them. that forced me to be able to build prototypes quickly. And that came because of the programming contest I was getting into. Because I kept doing that, a lot of those projects came to reality, and it got me a more sort of leadership. Some developed some of those skills of like, okay, now if this has to be built, what would be, you need to bring the team together. So on the other random aspect, I was the youngest person who was giving the ideas to people who were much more experienced than me. And because of all that, I think that gave a bit of confidence. So that was good. The second thing after that, I applied to universities and I got into Carnegie Mellon for computer science and machine learning. And I went through their 2 years experience. And after that, I got into Microsoft and Microsoft Research, where I again was working as a research engineer. Eventually, I joined a startup working in the blind community. And because it's a long career experience, I'm at Pinterest, where I run a team, the machine learning data science team. And that's a storyline filled with programming stories and hackathons, actually.
So tell me those prototypes, those you built, those 60 ideas, any one of them is a complete project now?
Oh, tons of them. I'll actually maybe focus a little on the aspects of hackathon, which I was telling.
Okay.
So hackathons are these events where you go in, you have 24 hours to 36 hours. You go in, you come up with an idea, and you try to build those ideas. And 20, 36 hours later, you go present that idea. Maybe you get an award, and that's how it works. So I would use what I would say is my life actually became that 90% of all the work I've done in my professional career came out of a hackathon, because I would go pitch it. And then once the thing has been built, I would then say, okay, this is the thing that we should be going and building. Right. And I was somebody with zero confidence, very hard speaking skills, because once I went through the inferiority complex of seeing people in US and people who are doing well on what they do, I just didn't have any confidence. But the one skill I did have was coming from those programming contests. And so I would go to these hackathons, build things quickly, but you'd be forced to speak and make it a really good storytelling piece in 2 minutes. You need to convince people, sell your thing. So I would do that well. And I would start getting, some awards from that. And still, I would also get some learning experiences from that. I presented something at Microsoft, and the EVP came and said, hey, this is the most remarkable piece of technology, and this is the ugliest piece of technology I've ever seen. What I learned is that I am good at machine learning, I'm bad at design, and that's not my foray. So what I learned is the second person I need to always hire is a designer. The third person I need to always hire in my team is a front-end engineer. So from that, I started going to these places, building the story of what needs to be done, build it, but start building a team. So I started recruiting people who are like 2 people in my team, 3 people in my team, 5, 7, 9, 16, 25. And 25 became that golden number. So Microsoft started to have large hackathons, planet's largest hackathon with 18,000 people. We would go in there, build a team, and most of the times you would have like a top 3 finish, like for 4 years in a row. We are winning those hackathons. And once those hackathons would end, we would go convince the leadership why this needs to be funded, and end up releasing things. So I'm very proud that most of the projects that we went in with ended up becoming a real product. We came out with the most used app for the blind community. When you go into Microsoft Office, you can dictate your voice. That was built during a hackathon. We are looking at Zoom right now, and this is being blurred. That came out of a feature. I mean, this is a feature every single video conferencing company is using. That was a hack in 2015-16 that we built, ironically, for people with profound hearing loss. We built a system so that the lips could be segmented out so that it could be transmitted on low bandwidth networks. so that lip reading could be enabled. And that became a business use case many, many years later. Um, Things like in augmented reality, if you had to remember your phone's location, that's a service that runs. So yeah, over my career, I think I have 140 hackathons at this point, and a few skill sets that came from all the programming quickly through Thapar days, and then other skills I had to develop of speaking. And coincidentally, now those speaking skills ended up taking me to places like TEDx, UN, and going to stages where I could speak at 3,000 in front of 3,000 people. So it's a journey of one thing leads to the other. You still learn what you are bad at and still keep developing those skills.
Fantastic. Koul, I always admire the way you first mention a challenge and then you tell us stepwise, always, not now, it's ever, whenever I've interacted with you, you always tell us how you took the first steps and the next, and then there is a process to it. And then I have always admired. Now that you mentioned TEDx and UN, I remember this story that you took a second year student from Thapar during COVID under your wings as a mentor, and you mentored him such that he presented at the NASA forum at NASA. Tell us about that case.
Sure. So the story is I live in California. California is a great place for hiking. California is also a great place for wildfires. We are known for a couple of natural disasters. Earthquake and wildfires are like the top ones. So I was hiking and my hiking part burnt down. And on one day when I was hiking, I actually saw fire. So I was like, what can I do? I thought maybe I could apply to be a volunteer firefighter, but you kind of need to have some muscles. You should be able to lift something, which I don't have, none. So I said, okay, maybe there's something we could do with AI. So I started looking at what NASA is currently doing in this area. And turns out that a lot more could be done with the latest in AI, which is like 2020 standards. So I've connected with some of the teams working in this area at NASA, and turns out they have some moonshot goals which are considered unsolved. And if somebody solves them, that would be a pretty big opportunity. So I made a claim that what if we get citizen scientists who are motivated, eager, determined to learn whatever is needed, and then be able to utilize those talents to solve these problems. And with the blessings of NASA and a part of them, what is called Frontier Development Labs, we set out to open up this thing called Space ML, this citizen science accelerator. So I made a call out for people who are motivated, and if they get selected, they can. And one of the people who applied was Mandeep. Fun fact, his name is single word Mandeep. At Thapar. He was in his second year, but the way he applied was that I think he was in his first year and Mansi had run a mentorship program. So he applied through that mentorship program, and I learned that, oh, he's really excited about AI. Just like me, he was trying to find how to apply, read on his own, doing all the things on his own self. So really shows very clear motivation. And he's obviously doing things ahead of time. So, I got paired up with him and I started mentoring him. And I basically would give him some thoughts on where are the places where he could really be better at. Great to read about AI, but could you at least improve your coding quality? Here's the resources. Could you give me some understanding of you're learning AI, but is it just a high level, like doing courses, or give me some deeper insights into a particular problem? So as we're going through that, he showed that if I give him some feedback, he could work on that feedback and actually prove his depth of understanding. So based on that, I gave him some tests based on the Space ML, and he was able to pass through them. So I said, okay, welcome to the club of Space ML. Here's the problem. We have a team, it's collaborative. You work with this, you show some professional standards. And if you're able to solve the problem, well, then you are going to present in front of NASA folks. So he worked on the problem and he was able to solve them. So I could see that journey of going from somebody who's excited to learning the skills and applying. And at that point, based on those results, we got him a slot to present in front of a room full of NASA scientists. And through that, we had to coach his speaking, cadence of how to speak, how to make a story which sounds understandable, and at the same time showcases your skills and your wins. He did that fabulously. He was so nervous before, but by the time he had practiced in those skills, he gave like a TED type talk in front of these scientists. And that came out with flying results so well that they said, okay, can you do this once again, but this time in front of the NASA leadership at the headquarters. He did that again, and the comment that came out was, if they had seen Mandeep's work before, they would not have run the trillion pixel challenge at CVPR, which is this tier 1 computer science conference. So now, having done that, seeing his journey, I always tell people, hey, I think nobody can boost your motivation. You kind of have to be motivated to begin with, to be able to then learn the skills. Learning the skills is the easy part, right? But you kind of need to have the determination, the ambition to do something which nobody can foster. So if you really want to be determined, go and watch on YouTube what the people who are at the top of their field are doing. Get inspired by that. Easy ways of spending a few hours to get motivated by. I'm not saying English talks, but things in your own field that you can get inspired by, and then reach out to people through mentorship or others. Like, what would I have to do so that in 4 years I can actually do this? When people ask you, where do you see yourself in 4 to 5 years, you need to have an answer of something crazy that you can achieve. And then there are tools around you in your university that can help you achieve that. And watching Mandeep's journey, and I'm sure if you interview him, he will tell you secretly that he has gotten admitted to top tier universities already. So in his reference letter, I could talk about all these stories. Like, his main reference letter is because of NASA.
It's one thing to be inspired yourself and have an inspiring story to tell, which you have from, I think, the time you came to Thapar. It's another achievement, Koul, that you take a child and you put him in the world's biggest platform. I was so proud of that moment. I'm sure you are too. And that's not the end of the journey. You had Kanak and later on more students who came to you, and I'm sure many, many more outside Thapar who are going with you through this journey of self, discovery and not comparative with other colleges or names, brands, like you said in the starting, and just finding your own end.
I should mention about Kanak, because if Mandeep presented at NASA, Kanak's work was presented at United Nations, which is crazy. And the even more crazy part was she was the only student, and everybody else had 5 to 10 years experience as an industry professional, working in companies like Apple, Facebook, Microsoft, Pinterest. So another student success story of presenting at the world's some of the biggest stages.
True that. So, Anirudh, I would like to ask you, how was your journey for the mentorship program that Thapar started? I would give it all to Thapar. They, like you said, I remember when we were talking and you said, DOSA would let you go everywhere. They'll fund your travels to all these hackathons or programming, coding, competitions across India. Now, with Thapar and their amazing acceptance to almost everything that you want to start. You just have to be a starter. Thapar gives you routes to fly off in all directions. How was your experience with Thapar mentorship program with students, and what would you recommend one, and why would you recommend it to other alumni to take up?
Sure. There is just insane value that gets generated if someone takes the opportunity to get mentored. And there's another side of benefit that comes if somebody decides to give their mentorship. So it's like a win-win story for both sides. So talking about in my journey, I think the thing that I was missing slightly was mentorship. So I was trying to write a paper without ever having like known how to write a paper. So it was me and a senior of mine, Udayan Khurana, where we are trying to write papers, but we were never. Usually, the way it happens is you work with a professor to do it. So we somehow didn't get that guidance or didn't seek that guidance because we're just working on a project on our own, right? And one thing maybe if I had told my older self is that if there's like one single thing I could have done is sought mentors uh, to open that thinking. We are all frogs in a pond who do not know the world beyond us, and we need to force ourselves to know that perspective. Uh, so that's where mentorship helps immensely. Maybe because we are already connected with our professors on a daily basis, so we don't appreciate their feedback as much. Right? Like it's a common thing. Like when your parents tell you something, you don't hear them, but when a different uncle or aunt says, you hear them out loud because you don't talk to them on a daily basis. So that's the perspective that that you can offer. So mentorship, humongous value. Learn new perspectives. Learn perspectives on what you might want to develop, what you are weak at, and what are high return on investment things you can do. So in my mentorship, I think it's the way I structure it. Look, uh, first time we meet up is going to be a free time that we'll meet up. But from that point onwards, the next time, if you really want to meet, you kind of have to show why it's worth my time to meet up with you. So we create a Google Doc. We write down the notes from this time. And the next time we meet up, what you would have to do so that it's worth my time meeting up with you. That excites people to actually do the work to show. And most people do more than like we have decided. Usually that's what happens. We then build like some miniature goals of what we want to achieve in 2 to 3 to 4 months. I understand students are busy, they have 100 things to do. So that's where we come up with a realistic expectation of what is actually doable. Usually it's just searching for topics like reading things, watching videos on this new side that they don't know. The second thing I'm a very big fan of is this phrase return on investment. You could go read a slow book, uh, pure theoretical, and then have like no proof that you have actually understood it. Or watch these 5 videos, read these 5 blogs, and try to just summarize these. By the time you start summarizing the 5th blog, turns out you have already caught up all the key terms that you need to know in this particular place, right? So I'm a really big fan of less work, more value, and that excites the mentees as well. And now, if that is the play, then there needs to be a motivation for if you go through this, what can you win for your career? Because you won't write in your resume, I was mentored. You don't write that. You have to show off. So, what is the high level goal? Maybe if you are able to achieve this, there is an internship coming up at CERN. There is an opportunity to apply for jobs in a data science field where you can show off these skills that you have developed for data science, right? So, whatever you do, you need to be self-serving goals of how this will help my career. And by doing this, maybe I can write a research paper. Maybe I can get into a better internship because I will have a show off of these skills. For the mentors, there's another humongous value. First of all, having to see someone being grown in their career is an amazing feeling. But can you give them successful tips on growing their career? So you can tell them like, hey, in my career, I have grown people who have in 5 years of time done this, this, and this. So I like to see my mentorship as, and I think everyone should have like a success rate of what happened? Was their career linear after you met them, or did their career go exponentially high up? Um, I mentor people quite a lot in my office itself. In the first half of 2022, I had mentored 40 employees there. I mentored, I would say, about 250 plus people at this point overall in my career. And I'm very proud of where their careers have gone. In fact, some of them are higher now than me in their career chain itself. So some of them have become top researchers. So I would say it's a win-win equation from both sides.
Absolutely, it is. I have the similar stories that your mentee tells us while they were working at you, with you, and how you, like you said, the same thing that you took a step at Thapar, and then you keep taking steps to now having that golden ratio of 25 members on your team to achieve something. Similarly, mentees have been telling me that how slowly, gradually you take them to the steps if the homework is done, if they've done and achieved what was mutually agreed on. I agree with you. Thank you for being a part of the mentorship program and keeping us, your stories and the stories with you and Mandeep and Kanak have really hit a heart with everybody, not only mentees but mentors. And I really, really need to thank you here, like not only focusing on the interview that is in progress, but also that it was my gratitude to you for bringing that's commendable what you brought to the table after you did with Mandeep. And I'm sure with these 250 mentees under you, and you're saying you're so proud of them having careers better than you, what else would one want from that? Anirudh, you've also been on TED Talks and given many inspirational speeches, not only on TED, but in various colleges across the world. Tell us about that. I remember at some point you saying, I was not good at speech. I wish I could have been more been into comparing while you were at Thapar. Tell us how that came around. What did you do to come here
Yeah.
thus far?
So first 2 years when I was in North America, people thought he just doesn't speak, or maybe there's some issue because I had lost all my confidence by watching people who are real PhDs, who are doing real research, and like why am I even here? Who am I? But the programming part started to take me to program hackathons and all. It got me that confidence, but then you had to speak. It would force you to speak. So from that, I think my confidence came back. So that was good. Then I wanted to go to conferences to learn from other people what they are doing in the field. But these conference tickets are really expensive. Like some of these conference tickets are like 1.5 lakh rupees. And who has the money to pay that, right? So I learned that if you're a speaker at these conferences, you can get a free ticket. I was like, okay, that sounds good. So I just need to speak at this conference, which I'm not good at. But the even bigger problem was how to even get accepted to these conferences, because many of the industry conferences, you have to have a really good talk. So what I would do is 6 months before, when they would be asking for talks, I would pretend to be an expert in this random new technology and say I'm going to give the talk on like this area and like what are the practical side, the state of art in this particular area, and I would assume that if I get selected, I would just learn in those 6 months that particular area, and that would be fine. So I would apply to them, and they would look at my resume, like my LinkedIn. They're like, yeah, this person generally has decent credentials, so he must be an expert in this area, working at Microsoft and all, and they would accept me, right? So I got a free $2,000 ticket to attend that conference. I'm like, excellent. And then I'd be looking at my clock, and turns out, oh, it's 5 months, 3 weeks, it's a week left to the conference, and I'm actually not even prepared for it. So what I would do is I would go print out every research paper, every news article, every GitHub thread on that particular area, put it in a binder, buy the nicest fluorescent marker, and take an international flight in airplane mode. And during that flight, read up everything that I can find about that area. And once I do that, when I reach and my flight takes down at that particular event, at this point I know at least everything on that area. And what I learned is the skill of summarizing it and giving insights based on whatever I've read, which anybody can literally do. So now I would actually try to speak it as like explain to a 5-year-old that particular area and build a talk where I'm actually going in increasing order of complexity. So whoever is it, whether it's an expert or whether it's somebody new, could attend that talk and go in this increasing arc of complexity. But then I would add my flavor, and my flavor was practicality. Here's what the research paper said, but here's the research paper, the GitHub saying this will not work the moment you go on large data. So I'm going to give you insights. So my flavor became of practicality. My speaking skills became of like the ability to summarize and explain this. And as I started doing that, my flavor of speaking came in, that I became really decent at taking a new field, being able to learn about it in 24 hours, decent enough that if I'm talking to a world expert in this area, they don't just think I'm the dumbest person in the room. I can still have a conversation along with them. And turns out the questions I had, which, oh, people will think this is just a poser, doesn't know anything about that area, they never come up. If somebody, usually two things will happen. Either they'll ask me a question that I have an answer to, and they'll ask me a tricky question, and I'll just say, oh, let's take this offline. That's a great question, and save my whatever credentials I had. And luckily, as you start doing them, you do fake it till you make it. You force yourself to learn a thing in under a week and become an expert over time. So I started doing them, and I learned so many areas just pretending to be an expert, getting those $2,000 tickets, that I actually became an expert eventually at certain areas. I wrote a book in artificial intelligence by becoming a mini expert in so many 17, 18 different areas that obviously I was then working on my in office. And because of those skills, something other happened. The projects that I would build, I have to sell them. So I have to do storytelling with emotion, storytelling with what the audience in the room is doing. So I would be selling my projects and selling it to Fortune 500 CXOs and trying to sell the AI components for Microsoft to these CXOs. So they would put me in front of these folks, and the feedback that I would get is based on a researcher who's saying that this is possible. I think their use cases are much more simpler. So I got a good sense there. I would go in media interviews for Microsoft and learned, trained on how to speak. And eventually I said, one dream would be to get into like a TED-like stage. So it would never happen, but why not apply? So I applied, and the application process asked for an essay. I didn't write an essay, so I write a poem in 10 sentences, which was so intriguing that they said, okay, let's at least audition him. So there were 200 people who applied. They called a few people for auditioning. I went in this place and I improvised by the audience on a speech for hackathons and one of the projects coming from the hackathon. Eventually, I got accepted. So from 200 people, they selected 8. Then through 6th to 7th months of journey, we are asked to write a talk. And then they would like massacre the words, like, this is not how you speak. You need to get the emotion out, how you write the sentence, where do you sell the one single idea that remains in the talk. And as I started doing that, my speech kept iterating 6 times, eventually going to the stage. So eventually I went on stage, talked about this on this red circle, moving around, selling the story. I was, as usual, underconfident. But as I started going on stage, some parts of the things resonated. People started laughing on the jokes. That got the confidence. And you can see in my speech, my confidence just keeps going up. And that was one of the talks that actually got a standing ovation by 3,000 people. So that was an exciting event to have.
I know when that happened in that talk, because I follow you on LinkedIn. It's such a proud way you put it, Koul. That's why you're cool. You inspire anybody who will be hearing this. I'm telling you right now. because I
Thank
am
you.
feeling it. The way I remember how you started saying about your parents, saying that is what they told me, work hard. I think you've kept your words to them. And they and us, we are very proud of you. Because I think all that you've said through all the things that you wanted to be and went for and wanted to achieve, I think you've worked very, 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 very hard and learned and are ready to iterate and ready to and it's a beautiful, and now that you hear it, it's like this so good that somebody, I imagine the Ted's journey with them for 6 months must have really transformed even every word because they're coaching you and they're fantastic. Cool, it's an honor to know you, and it's so good to sit you down here and have this conversation. I could do it for longer. I know you have to go. So, some words of advice for me, for the students, for Thapar. You could say anything. For Dr. Maninder, I know you how much you love him. We all do. So tell us anything, and then I know you have to be somewhere, and we'll continue with that, please.
I think as parting thoughts, I would say be ambitious, get comfortable being uncomfortable, seek a mentor, and showcase your inner exceptionalism. Because when people see that, opportunities start coming on your stage. I think it went on mute.
Yes, it was. Thank you so much for your time, Anirudh. This was fantastic. It, as always, is. You always are a pill of energy, and then I can stay for a year like so, and then come back to you and speak to you about it.